Welcome to the first episode of Coming Home, a Gordon College podcast brought to you by the Office of Diversity, Community, and Belonging. My name is Dr. Nathaniel Perez, and I'm joined by my co host, Ryan Sotero Galifi. In today's episode, we are going to center on celebrating Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month. Our guests today are a combination of some of our staff and students here at Gordon College.
Hispanic and Latino people are a crucial part of American culture. Countless Hispanic and Latino people have helped to build and shape this country that we call home. At Gordon College, our foundation is found in Christ, but we also recognize that God has gifted us with diversity and the opportunity to not only learn from others, but to celebrate others. We hold firmly to God's biblical vision of diversity, and Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil's words capture that sentiment perfectly when she says, "No one culture, people, or language can adequately reflect the splendor of God."
Carmen, why don't you start by telling us your name and about yourself?
Sure. My name is Carmen Ayerve Queen, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at Gordon. I am from Colombia. I was born there. My mom is Colombian and my father Ecuadorian. Um, they met in Colombia, and that's where I was born. When I was about 2 years old, the situation in Colombia, in Bogota, where we were living, had gotten a little challenging. My father was concerned about increase in violence in the community and wanted to move us to a better place. And so he had family in the States, and he brought us to the U.S. So, yeah.
Rachel.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm Rachel Cespedes Monroy. I am a first-year student here. I'm studying Christian ministries with a concentration in pastoral. I'm a child of immigrants. My dad is Costa Rican and my mom is Guatemalan. Grew up in Jersey. Love Jersey. Being up here in New England has been a fun experience, but I've always, kept my culture close, and that's definitely what keeps me going. Mm.
Natalia.
My name is Natalia. I've moved around a little bit. I was born in Illinois, grew up in Florida, moved back to Illinois, and then moved to Texas. So I've gotten a little bit of everything, but my parents are Dominican, both immigrants, and they grew up here in Massachusetts. So I have a really, really big Dominican family, and that's really important to me. I didn't grow up learning the language, but I had to talk to my grandparents in Spanish. Everything I did was in Spanish. So it's very special to have that culture so close to me on both sides. But yeah.
Yes.
My name is Mikhail Pita. I'm a sophomore music education major here at Gordon with a minor in psychology. Both my parents are from the Dominican Republic. Well, sorry. Both my ethnicity is Dominican. My father was born and raised in the DR, and then he moved here when he was like a teenager. My mother was born here in Massachusetts, but her parents were born in DR, and they immigrated here. They met here, they got married, had my mother, and then my parents met here.
My name is Debra Hernandez. My mom is from Costa Rica and my dad's from El Salvador. They met in the States. They met in Massachusetts while my dad was church planting. It's like a whole history. And then they got married and they had my sister and I, and I've lived in New Hampshire all my life. So.
My name is Amaris Hernandez Diaz. I am a double major in Christian ministries with a concentration in social impact and general communications with a minor in peace and conflict and another minor in biblical studies. So it's a really long thing, but my family and I are from Puerto Rico, and my dad is from specifically like the campo, and my mom is from the city. They met in Boston, and then they had me in Florida. And then my dad moved to Maryland, and my mom moved up with me to Quincy, Massachusetts. So I'm kind of a little bit from everywhere. I did all of my schooling in Florida, but all of my summers and stuff were spent with my dad in Maryland or in Puerto Rico.
Awesome. Alrighty. So, Carmen, what makes you proud as a Latina?
So many things. I think that the growing up in a Latin family with my Colombian and Ecuadorian culture, I saw so much strength in my parents and in extended family members who had to work really hard. And so that resiliency and that determination to work hard no matter what, just when I think about my culture, I think of that. I think of like hardworking people who are just not going to give up and persevere through challenges. So that makes me very proud.
What makes you proud to be Latina?
I love being Latina. I think one of my favorite things is the fact that I get to speak Spanish. First language, I learned English in school, and I think for me, my history was I did lose my ability to speak Spanish as a kid. My parents were trying to learn English, so once I started school, they used me to practice, and then I lost it. And then I was no longer able to communicate with my extended family. So then it became a whole process of trying to gain that back. And my parents have always been super supportive of me, whether or not like I chose to speak Spanish or not. But definitely my favorite part about being Latina is just that ability to communicate in something other than just English. So yeah.
The only word that comes to mind is like joy. I feel like such joy. Like dancing bachata, I feel such joy, like talking in Spanish with my family. Making food, I feel like food is such a love language in Hispanic and Latino culture. So just being able to fully like indulge in that and like being able to hear my family's experiences or like connections they have to a certain story about, a food they make or a certain dance that they do, like stuff like that. You just learn so much, and that allows me to see the joy in their lives and like travel through that. So I find so much joy being able to listen to Dominican music, eat Dominican food. Like it only makes me happy. Like I never feel any like resentment or frustration when I'm around people that look like me and speak like me. So yeah, just joy.
What I like about being Puerto Rican, I always kind of say this to people, there's just a rhythm to everything. I'm sure in Cuba and DR that's like very in the Caribbean, you got a little flavor to you and everything that you do. People always say that Puerto Ricans sound like they're singing when they're talking, or that when we're making food, there's always music happening. And I think it's just really cool because everything that you do, being in a tropical environment, makes it so much more like bright and music and I don't know, rhythm. That's the best part about being Puerto Rican specifically, but I think Latina too, everything that we do is really cool.
I would also say strength. Just like hearing of my parents' stories and how they got here and just their cultures and their families, very empowering and very encouraging. Also just laughter. I feel like us Latinos are like really funny and and like really weird, and every country has different sayings, and then we share with each other like, oh no, we don't say that there because that means something else, or oh we say that whatever. We're just like a funny people, and we love to laugh and we love to spend time with each other, community, family, food. It's just it's so vibrant.
I think adding on to Deborah and Carmen is that, well, for one, I think regardless of what country you're from, we're all hardworking. We're all motivated. We have a plan, we think for our families. But I think even beyond that, one of the things that I love most about Latinos is just the love we have for one another.
Right, yeah.
Even people beyond our family, we treat them like family.
Yeah.
And we're all connected in that. And I think it's so cool, especially when you're in a space that's not predominantly Hispanic or Latino. If you find someone who's like you just immediately bond, and you're able to find that connection even if you don't have anything else in common, where it's like you're looking out for each other and you're loving on each other because you all know what it's like.
For sure.
I want to talk a little bit about faith or so, but as we think about this in families or so, what did faith look like in your household? Who were some of the great influences in your house of your faith today?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Whoever. I mean, I would say my mom for sure. I was born into a charismatic Catholic family, which makes no sense, but
Hey.
yeah, I brought it up the one time in class and somebody was like, okay. It's like, yeah. But no, we've always been a very lively group. When I was 7, we started going to a Pentecostal Christian church. And my mom was always the person who she showed me God. And I know my parents truly prayed for me. Like me being here today, standing here and being at Gordon, I'm 23, almost 23, and I'm a freshman. And that is a true testament to God that I'm here. And I know it's my parents' prayers that I got this far. But I mean, it's always a saying, the power of a mother's prayer.
Mm.
This woman prays like nobody's business, and
Mm.
it's definitely something that keeps me going.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, I think of my grandparents on my dad's side. Um, I grew up in Florida, like I said, but it was like an English and Spanish church. So in the mornings, I'd like experience, like an English service, but then, in the afternoon, it's like even more lively. There's tambourines under each like pew.
No way.
So it was just like it was so nice living and growing up with both languages. So like when I was with my parents, it was like a lively side of faith in church and just like everybody singing and praising and like older adults who I didn't know were like dancing with me, and I'm like, okay. But on my dad's side, with my grandparents, is more like stoic. Like my grandpa, he would always just be singing hymns. He would always be singing like some kind of Spanish hymn. Like when I came to Gordon, I didn't know any of the hymns they were singing in chapel because I was like, I only know these in Spanish. I don't know what this is, but just that like kind of calming nature to how he approached Christianity and my grandma too, just like the way that they carried themselves, like just powerful prayer warriors for me and my family, and always asking like, how's my faith? My grandpa, he has onset dementia, but the one thing he'll always ask me is, how's my faith? Like he'll
That's awesome.
never forget that. He'll never forget a verse. He'll never forget a hymn. So it's just been so inspiring to being so close to my grandparents, or my grandpa specifically, who has that connection to God and like sees God in that way. But yeah. It's
I can go. I grew up very Pentecostal.
Yeah.
So I've always lived in New Hampshire, so we would drive about an hour to Everett every Sunday. But also, like, my dad was part of like the elders there, and my mom was the director of worship, which I'm a music major now, so it makes sense. But I love the culture of so much fellowship in church, and I don't have a memory where I would go to church and then after the service was over, I'd go home. We would always stay after. There's always people talking after. And just so much fellowship and community and being there for one another, and music. But music is a very integral part of my life, but just music in general for Latinos. But yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a Dominican Methodist church, although we were very like evangelical. And I'm really grateful for that experience. I don't attend that church anymore, but I'm still well connected to the people there, and just the culture that we had there of everyone was family. And going back to what I was saying earlier, everyone is family, and we all care about each other's relationships with God. I felt like I could really open up to the people there, and they held me accountable. There was I feel like a lot of churches, more non-denominational churches or American churches that I go to today, are a lot more like, I don't want to say superficial, but they aren't as like deeply entrenched with each other. Whereas I feel like in that like small corner church that I was going to, we grew up together and we lived life together. And that's something that I've really missed, I would say.
Yeah, that was one big thing that whenever I was moving around, like I had a home church in Florida, I had a church in Illinois, but when I went to Texas, like it's the majority of the people there are Mexican, so everybody has like generations and generations of family there. And when we tried to get connected with the church, it was very difficult because everybody knew each other in that church. So there's positive of like, oh wow, like they're so deeply connected to the people there, like, it's a family, but it's also like, how do we welcome others who aren't in that church from the moment they're born? So I've always seen like both sides of like, how can we welcome in others as they are family and like honor the people who are family in that church too. But that's only something I've noticed, like, coming to college and growing up with like, oh wow, like it felt like family to me, but maybe someone was trying to visit my church who like, was just visiting by and didn't have someone they knew there and just wanted to get to know the Lord, but maybe they felt secluded because everybody knew each other. So it's something I always try to keep in mind of churches whenever I go to them, of just like seeing how can we welcome people like that Latino family of like, okay, you're a part of our family and now
Yeah.
come join. But yeah.
Yeah. My parents are a huge representative for like how I got into my faith. My dad, he didn't grow up in the church. He actually grew up in a very urban context where he was leaders of gangs, and he didn't even know who Jesus was. And then he found Jesus from a woman who went to his jail that he was at, and he got saved there and got baptized in the toilet.
Wow.
And like growing up with him, he's kind of just specifically centered me around people who don't have like the I grew up going to church kind of background. So that's been really cool because I have been very interdenominational in my history of going to churches. Like I've been to Pentecostal churches and Baptist because my mom grew up Baptist, Puerto Rican Baptist. I gave my life to Christ at an Every Nation church, and now I go to a Nazarene church, and it's like it's cool to see the different history. And my mom grew up going to church, but she became an atheist in college. And then God kind of slapped her in the face in the best way possible, like in a kind way. God's
Yes, he does.
gracious. You know what I mean? And ever since then, she is a pastor, and her ministry is for young people. So she's specifically centered me around people who kind of are in so many different faith formations. So me growing up, it was cool to see them show me what culture looks like in churches, because culture is such a broad term for so many, a melting pot of things. So I got to see the denominations, I got to see cultural backgrounds, I got to see urban, rural, suburban. Like my faith culture doesn't just solely depend on being Puerto Rican. It's like everything that we can find. Jesus loves it. So I think that's the coolest part about mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I also grew up in a Catholic family, not a charismatic Catholic, but a Catholic family that had like generations of Catholicism. My father's side specifically, he was one of 8 children, and the boys were all sent to the Jesuit boarding school when they were 12 years old, and they were raised by the Jesuits. My father was 6 months away from being ordained as a Jesuit priest before he realized that that was not what he wanted to do, and that's when then his path changed, and he ended up in a position in Colombia where he met my mom. But and my mom grew up in a also very strong Catholic family. And I think part of it too is that it wasn't a Catholic, as sometimes we think about Catholicism in what's the word, just caught up in the motions of it, but they were true, like solid faith in the Lord, like guided them through every experience, through moving with 2 kids under the age of 2 to another country and starting their lives all over again. And, it was God that they trusted in. And all our lives we grew up just hearing that. And my mother too, a prayer warrior. As I became a mom, she was always the person that I would call. And sometimes before I even said what I was calling about, she knew. And that her mom was like that. Her sister was like that. Like there was this bond. So these women faith was so, I mean, I can't imagine a conversation where we didn't talk about Jesus. I can't imagine ever her, even in the hardest moments of my mother's life, she would always say to me, Bendito sea el Señor, blessed be the Lord. And when I was young and kind of, you face challenges and you're I wasn't questioning, but sort of frustrated. It's like, why are you saying that? Like, this awful thing just happened. Why are you saying, blessed be the Lord? And now I get it, because in all things, she always praised God, always. So, and she went through some really, really challenging times. So that faith that was so part of us was really important. But I also remember as a child, wherever they went, so we grew up in Massachusetts, but then in retirement, they moved to Florida. They'd start prayer groups, often with a lot of Latinos. So we had a prayer group when we were kids that met at our house. And it started as a prayer group, and it ended with food and music.
Nice. As it should.
Always, as it should.
Yeah.
So it was a very quiet prayer, very, like, they read the Bible together and they prayed. And sure enough, as soon as, the amen was said, okay, what are we eating? Like, turn on the music. So I just remember it was lovely. It was lovely. So.
Thank you,
That's
Carmen.
amazing.
You've all kind of touched on this in different ways, but is there a specific tradition in mind that you can think of? It can be a holiday thing, a birthday thing, an everyday thing that just kind of sticks out to you and makes you think of your culture and of home. Anyone can go.
Well, for Christmas, we didn't do it last year. I was so sad. I was trying to lead it, but I'm not a singer, so I couldn't do it. But we like sit around with each other and we sing Spanish hymns, specifically like Christmas hymns. And like my tia has like the sheets of paper like underneath her mattress. And she like brings it out and we like sing like Christmas hymns with each other. And like we all talk about at least last year we talked about like everybody's like own immigration story, because with my dad, they all immigrated at different times. So they all talked about what their stories were like, and then we sang hymns together. We ate pastelones. It was so good. So it's just like, again, like that joy of like getting to know my family, of getting to know who they are, and like praising the Lord in the Spanish language specifically. I just feel like there's nothing a translation can do that just really brings out what like Spanish worship music means to me. So yeah, that's one of them.
That's cool.
I think for me, I grew up having a very American Christmas, but I was always surrounded by family, or not necessarily our extended family, but rather like my parents found family here. Most of my extended family is back home in Costa Rica and Guatemala. But last Christmas, I did get to experience a Guatemalan Christmas, and it was so fun, just seeing how much the family really does come together. My mom's side of the family is huge. She has 6 brothers, and they have all their multiple kids. I'm the only one who's an only child. So it's just like growing up with my cousins from a distance, and actually finally getting to experience what was always taught to me as a familial holiday, and actually being with them. One of my favorite parts was being able to play Loteria. I love Loteria.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I will say I'm very good. But no, like that was definitely, it was something I've never done before. And then, I got to experience it for the first time last year, and now I'm just like looking forward to going back and then doing that again. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Are these holiday traditions or just
Any tradition.
Any.
on my dad's side, he has a ton of siblings and a ton of cousins, and they're all here. So it's really awesome. Every Sunday, or almost every Sunday, they all meet at my grandmother's house. And it's like a small apartment. There's not a ton of space,
Right.
but they make it work. And it's I always love it when I get the chance to go and just sit with them and listen to them laugh and listen to them just tell their stories of like when they grew up, how they grew up, the different people that they used to know. And my family is so big that they like know everyone, like at least in Lawrence where I grew up. They know all these random people, and I'm like, who are these people that you're talking about? But it's like every Sunday they go and they spend that time together as family. And it stinks because like the past few years I haven't been able to go as much just because I'm working or I'm doing other things for school. But when I can go, it's always a great time.
That's so cool. I don't have any like actual traditions, but just the vibe in the house when there's a big holiday and like the kids are like in the living room or like waiting for the moms to like finish cooking, or like the mom's like arregle su cuarto, and even though like no one's going upstairs, but it's like, okay, I don't want to make you mad, so I'm going to clean my room. And just like the anticipation of having people over. But my mom, one of her brothers lives in Pennsylvania, but the rest of her family is in Costa Rica, so we don't really have any family here. That's been a little tough sometimes because I visit Costa Rica and like my heart like is flooded with joy being with family, and I miss that deeply here. But my parents met a couple people in Massachusetts when they were like in their 20s, and they all got married, and like now all their kids are friends. And but just like waiting around for the food to be ready, and just like just like the moms in the kitchen and helping out and eating the food and running away. Just all, just like the love.
Yeah.
That's cool. In Puerto Rico, music's everything. Like you'll hear music on every single corner. You go to a baseball game, they're gonna play their drums and stuff, even though you lost. Like you'll be seeing the viejitos dancing in the like right in front of their house, the mom dancing while she's cooking. That's so cool. And every little girl, a lot of the times you'll see we grew up dancing what's called bomba, and it's these huge skirts. I was explaining somebody earlier, and it's these huge skirts, and usually the music tells a person how to dance. But in bomba, the dancer with the skirt tells the drummer what to do. So with every movement that you make and with every like steps that you take, the drummer is watching every little thing that you do so that they can hit the beat exactly. So it's so cool. And we also do Christmas carols, except instead of just like going up to the house, you wait up until they open up the door, and the goal is to let them to let the carolers inside of your home so that you can get food and stuff. And all of the songs are like the most they're like the most silliest songs that you'll ever hear, and that's the point. Like they're supposed to annoy you. But then like after a while it gets really almost poetic, because then you'll start hearing things about Jesus and how important he is in every single thing that we do, and how he's in every aspect of our lives. It's music is everything in PR.
As a child, we would go back to Colombia for Christmas. We would spend Christmas in Colombia, and then we'd spend New Year's in Ecuador with my dad's family. And both families had like the best traditions. In Colombia, they do something called La Novena. So the 9 days before Christmas, each night you go to a different family member's home, and they have it's songs and prayers, and then of course the food and the anticipation of Christmas. So that was a favorite thing we would do. And then in Ecuador with my dad's family, I remember this was a New Year's tradition, and it just was so. We would spend the 31st getting ready at my aunt's house, which she lived like more in the country, and so there would be a big cookout of sorts, but then all of us kids, they would have us collect people's old clothes to make el año viejo. So you made sort of a scarecrow type of a creature with everything old. Everything had to be old as you could get it. And it was the año viejo. And then at nighttime, everybody would like sort of like, you make resolutions, but sort of like what you would want for the new year ahead. And you'd burn the old year. You'd burn all the old stuff. Like that year's gone, and now we welcome in the new year. And that side of the family adopted a tradition that I think is from Spain, where you eat the 12 grapes at the stroke of midnight. So we always did that. So those are just the sweet memories. And again, at my dad's house, there was music. My aunt played the piano. Like there was always, and the dancing, the Ecuadorian music that I can't say I love it in my heart as a style of music. It makes me cry, because it just brings us. But there'd always be dancing, which I loved, and my father would always make me dance, even though I didn't want to. I was like, but these are just these things that are just so still memories that are so alive. And again, what we've all talked about, that music and that joy and that love and that family. So, yeah.
For sure.
For many people, like the Hispanic Latino that come to the United States for the first time, everybody's essentially put like under one race, or so that's for the first time you become Hispanic Latino. But Hispanic Latinos are people made up from different countries, or so. What is that feeling been like, essentially, to like come under one label, or so, and then how do you maintain your identity, or so, in the midst of all of that?
Oh my goodness.
That was really hard for me. I mean, PR, we have a mix of everything. Like when people say, "Oh yeah, you look Puerto Rican," I'm like, "What is a Puerto Rican supposed to look like?" Because we have Tainos and we have Spanish and we have African and literally everybody's ancestry. So there's not really a race box that you can check off. So when I went to school and stuff, and people would be like, "Oh yeah, you're Hispanic," and I'm like, "Whoa, my skin is kind of fair. What does that mean? Like, am I white? Am I not? Am I black solely because I'm not European? Like, what does that look like for me?" And I don't know if that's something that you guys feel like, what is that even supposed to mean? It's so hard to be in the mainland, or, well, if you're not, be in the United States, and have to fit into a certain group, but know that you're not a part of that group. I think the only time I ever actually felt like I was a part of something is when I saw my Cuban, Dominican, Haitian, like Puerto Rican people, because all of us have very similar history.
Yeah, growing up in Illinois, I did dance, and like I didn't know this, but I was the only Latino in the school. And so whenever I had a recital once, like a mom had told me, she's like, "Oh, you don't need makeup, like you'll show up on stage." And I was like, "Why?" And she goes, "Oh, well, you're brown." And I said, "I am?" And so like I just never had realized that like I was different from everybody else around me. And so like that time period, like middle school to like early high school, I was like, "Oh yeah, like I am different." And then growing up with like where I am in Texas, like everybody's Mexican. Like we are literally 5 minutes away to the border to Mexico. So everybody in my classroom is like born and raised in Mexico, or like their family's Mexican. So like it was just so hard to separate like, you know, my Dominican like identity from everybody else's Mexican identity. Like during school they would celebrate Mexican Independence Day, and like everybody would, you know, dress in their traditional clothes, like everything. And I was just like, well, I don't know what to do here. So it's just a lot of it has been, at least now, like in college, like trying to learn more about what it means to be Dominican, and like, okay, like let me actually intentionally learn, you know, what separates me from everybody else, what you know, marks me as Dominican. And so that journey has been really fun, but also very hard because like visiting the Dominican Republic, like you said, like everybody's like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean I'm black? Like, what are you talking about?" So like just learning that like dynamic of, you know, Dominican Republic and, you know, Dominican and Haiti in general is just a topic to discuss on the outside, but it's so like in depth that I feel like, I don't know, you can't fit it into a conversation, but it's definitely something that takes time to intentionally learn. And that's something that I've really appreciated, is like people intentionally wanting to learn what makes you different, like what makes you in your journey special. But yeah.
I would agree. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I grew up in an area with a lot of Dominicans, but it was also, the school I went to was very diverse. However, a lot of the classes I was taking, I was the only Latino, and I was the only, if I wasn't the only Latino, I was the only Dominican.
Yeah.
And so I found myself a lot of the times just, like, I was around people that were like me, but they weren't around. It's like around.
Yeah.
And so I feel like coming to college this time has been me really trying to find ways to connect with that culture as well. Just because, it was around me, but I wasn't really connected to it as much as I could have been and as much as I wanted to be. In terms of connecting or differentiating myself from like being Hispanic, I feel like I don't want to say it's not that deep, but I don't feel the need to be like, "Oh, well, you're El Salvadorian, so I don't like I'm gonna be different.
Right,
Like we
right.
all have our own different traditions, our own different
Yeah.
cultures. But I've never really felt the need to be like to have that distinction really
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
I know.
Kind of going off from what you both said. Well, I was the only Latina from like, I don't know. I live in like a cow town in New Hampshire, where my family was the only like non-white family in our neighborhood too. So when anyone would ask me, or that conversation was brought up, they like had no idea. Like, oh, like where is Costa Rica? What is that? Like, I'm like, of course we're all children, so it's like I'll give it to you. Like we're children, it's fine. Or like when anyone would mention any Hispanic country, they'd point to me. They're like, oh, is that where you're from? I'm like, no, that's not where I'm from. And growing up, I would like make the joke of being whitewashed because like when I went to like my high school in New Hampshire, like it was not diverse at all. So I felt like part of my culture was and my identity was lost because I just like didn't have anyone around me that spoke Spanish or was Latino or whatever. So definitely like while I've been here, I've been trying to like reconnect, but obviously I'm so busy. But even just like like fleeting moments of like meeting people that speak Spanish and you can have a little conversation with them in Spanish is so encouraging. You're like, oh, there's still people that are like me and that are with me in that regard. But yeah, it's been very different growing up in rural New Hampshire. But yeah.
I know. I think for me, my hometown super diverse. You asked me about it, I will say the minority or the majority, and that was always such a fun experience. But I've always known I was different because we live in America. You know, I still am a minority. I think my first real experience of understanding that I was around 3, 4 years old in the supermarket with my mom, and my mom was trying to find something. She had to go ask an employee there. And obviously, with her broken English, it did not go well. The employee was rude, just making fun of her for it. And I knew from that moment, I was like, we're different.
Yeah.
But, I'm very thankful for the experience I had growing up in school because I wasn't that different. And then my last college, predominantly white, Amish town, Lancaster,
Whoa.
Pennsylvania. I was the only Latina there. Well, not really. The only one I really knew. For me, it was a matter of I have to be very Hispanic because that was what everybody else expected from me. And I was just like, that's not who I am, though. Like, yes, it is a big part of me, but it's not me entirely. And so I remember sitting in classrooms having a good discussion and somebody later on being like, I never knew you were that smart. And I'm like, yeah.
What? Oh
And
no.
I'm just like, okay, like, sir, I promise you I am. I'm not a stereotype. Like, I'm here. I've made it this far. So it's just like always knowing in the back of my head, like, there's going to be people who don't agree with who I am, but also being super proud of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's funny, I have similarities, Rachel and Deborah. I remember too, as a child, being in the grocery store with my mom, and back then everybody wrote checks, or you wrote a lot of checks. You didn't use the card. And my mother, again, was doing her best to learn English, but spelling the number 8 is very difficult, even when you're, learning all those vowels. And wait, why is there a G in there? What is it?
What is
And
that?
like what is that all about? It makes no sense. And I remember the cashier like just getting frustrated that my mom, and I remember whispering to my mother how to spell it. So it was moments like that where I knew like we were different. I grew up in a very diverse, in the city, in Springfield, very diverse, went to a very diverse high school, had a lot of friends from all over. But then I moved in my current place where I live, it's not as diverse. I live in Ipswich. There's growing diversity, but it's primarily white. And so all my friendships with my Latin friends or Spanish-speaking friends, I've really, unfortunately, just sort of just because of time and space and all that, I've lost them. But I did reconnect with so those of us who are Latinas connected. We found each other in this small town, and it's been wonderful. At the moment, we're all moms, busy and all that, so it's been hard. But when we see each other, it's that like, oh, immediately we speak Spanish to each other. It just comes naturally. So that's been wonderful. But yeah, growing up knowing that your experience is different and having kids say things to you. And again, we were kids, I can't fully. It's just but they would say, "Oh, is your food spicy? Do you eat spicy food?
Yeah.
Or you're Spanish?" And it was this feeling like, okay, no, we don't eat spicy food. My father can't see a pepper. I mean,
Right.
and just teaching them. But then because of that culture, my parents were so inviting that our friends came in and they got to know my family. And then when they took Spanish in high school, we're practicing Spanish with my parents, and my father had been a Spanish teacher. So, it was this like, come in, let me tell you. And fortunately, we had friends who wanted to get to know us. So it was really interesting journey. Yeah.
So to pivot the conversation a little bit, immigration is a topic that's often aimed at the Hispanic and Latino community in the United States. How would you like to see America address this topic?
It is my reality every day. Like I said, I'm a child of immigrants. My parents just got their residency 2 years ago. So living through that, I wish America could just be more graceful, uh, more kind with it. I was my second day of senior year. We get a letter in the mail, and it was a deportation order for my parents. So that was, we didn't get deported, thank God, but it was a very scary time for me because I didn't know what was going on. I was just starting my senior year. But luckily I did have friends who offered me the most support they could, but it was, like I said, it's my reality. Knowing some of my best friends now just moved here from their respective home countries, and it's like I know the fear that they live with, like, if something happens, God forbid they get pulled over and the cop is in a bad mood that day,
Right.
they can get arrested and from then on be deported. So immigration is such a hard topic, but it is something that we do need to speak about and just be very kind about it.
One thing I found interesting, when I went to a mission trip in Iceland this past spring, and Iceland has a very large refugee population. And the people that we were working with, a lot of them were from Venezuela. And so just getting to talk to a few of them, I was like, oh, random. Why are you guys in Iceland? Because, the U.S. is a lot closer. I feel like a lot more people go to the U.S. And they were like, oh, why would we go there? They don't like us. They never accept us. And like of all the stories that we've heard, like Iceland's been so much more welcoming.
Right.
And I just was blown away by that because, like, yeah, I know that the U.S. isn't very welcoming, but knowing how we started and how we were such a country for everyone else to come seek safety, and now it's like where that country that you don't want to go to is like really interesting and really scary.
Yeah, I see immigration all the time just because of how close I am to the border. Like like I said, mentioned, like everybody, or at least half of the people in my class either didn't have citizenship themselves, or their parents definitely didn't, or their grandparents. Like everybody in my class could at least name somebody who didn't have papers, and so like I had never experienced that within my nuclear family. Like my parents, like they immigrated and got their citizenship a while ago, and everybody in my family got theirs a while ago too. And I was born here, so I didn't have that experience so closely to me. But going to Texas and seeing like everybody's lives, like one of my best friends, she has to go back and forth between seeing her mom in the U.S. and then seeing her dad in Mexico. And my school used to take a bus to the border and would bring kids over for high school and then have to bring them back at the end of the day. So it's been a very new world for me to see that and have that so close to home. And the one word that comes up for me is just grace. Like there needs to be grace and there needs to be empathy when it comes to something like that, especially when it's something we don't understand. I feel like at least America is very quick to judge and quick to say no and quick to say that's not right. but there needs to be a conversation. There needs to be at least some understanding of, okay, why, or what do you need, or how can we support, instead of just, you know what, no, don't come here, or you know what, no, that's not possible, or you need to go through this 50 million step process and then maybe. So it's just, there needs to be a lot more grace and intentionality with figuring out that story and seeing what you can do to help versus not trying. But yeah.
I actually got to go to the border of Texas and Mexico.
No way.
Yeah,
Progreso?
this past spring. No, it
Oh.
was like the city of Juarez.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that area. I was actually staying at a church a mile away from the border. So
Okay.
every day we would pass by the border on our way to like different areas. And the biggest thing that I learned is vocabulary is everything. Like there's a difference between a migrant, an immigrant, and a refugee. And to put them all under the title of immigrant and dangerous is really heartbreaking, because we would go to a refugee home and hear stories from people. And one of the women, she was from DR, and she like said, well, I actually had to go all the way to El Salvador to get to this country, to get to that country, and I got all of my money stolen, and I did this, and then the cartel were after me, and then I got here, and it took me 2 months.
Yeah.
I was like, but then how long did you have to stay at the border? And she says, well, I was in the heat for a really long time and just waiting outside, waiting for somebody to come and get me. And just hearing that, I was like, but you're a refugee, and people were calling her an immigrant, and she was like, no, I'm just trying to seek safety.
Right.
I think a lot of people get that so confused, and that's really hard. But I've had the privilege of being technically a United States citizen, since Puerto Rico is a territory. But to be so close to that and see how heartbreaking it is for nobody to really fully understand that is really hard.
Being an immigrant myself, like I was a child when I came, and it was a different time, but knowing my parents' story and why they came has given me that understood that, I don't know, I guess it's the empathy that you have and we should have. Not everyone leaves their country because they just feel like it. They just want to go to a new place and start all over again. Usually a person who's immigrating or, is leaving something for something with the hope of something better. Or, in some situations it's like a refugee because they're seeking safety. So I just think that there's a story for every person who's coming in here, and we need to listen, and we can't be quick to judge and get caught up in, what we hear and see out there, because when you meet the person face to face and you hear their story, you gain a new understanding. So, yeah, I think it's a very important conversation that needs to happen, and I think too that in a country like ours, which has been and continues to be able to do so much, if we could only put our heads together around immigration the way we put our heads together around other things, what could we do? How could we turn how could we turn this into something really, really good, really good and beneficial for all of us? So that's the hope. Yeah.
I feel like I always want to know more with like difficult topics such as immigration. Like I feel like I'm not educated enough to like know all like the laws, but I do feel like there needs to be so much grace. Like my parents became citizens very early on when they moved here. But we had a lot of family friends that didn't have papers, and when I was younger I didn't understand, and like I didn't understand their limitations, like why couldn't they do this or that, and it's because they didn't have papers, but they were so hardworking and so loving, and we would see them struggle. So they're not just like a file number, they're not just like paperwork. These are families, that people that are leaving their countries for whatever reason, in the hopes to establish a new life here. But I also feel like there's not people moving to the US or Latinos moving to the US like don't know what they're getting into in a way. or like they move here and they're just left to defend for themselves. And that's like a very hard reality. Or like I feel like a lot of Latinos have this idea of what the US is, at least for my parents. They had this idea of what America was going to be. And in one way it was, but then in another, they like realized how hard it is to live here and how hard it is to build your life from nothing. I mean, my dad came here when he was 18 with his dad. And then his dad got deported. I think for like drug possession or something. So his dad had to go back to El Salvador and had to stay there for like 20 years. So he couldn't leave the country. And then my dad was like just here at 18, like homeless. Like had no one. He didn't know the language. He like found some random people to live with and kind of like I don't know, like gathered what he could and to like make a life for himself. And yeah, it's just like I can't imagine being placed in a country where you don't speak the language and you know nothing and you thought it was going to be something different and it wasn't. And that I feel like that's the case for many families. So I feel like there's no support system in place. And yes, you can immigrate here and whatever, but what then? You know? That's
I think a lot of the times it's also not that they want to leave.
Yeah.
It's that they have to leave.
Yes.
Or because the life that they have isn't viable and they're in danger, their kids are in danger. I think a lot of times Americans think, well, oh, they just want to come they want to take what we have. But that's not really the case. Like a lot of my family would still be in DR if it was safe, but it's not.
Yes.
And so they have to be here because they have nowhere else to go. And I think that with the grace, a lot of people forget that.
If you had one word or so that you would, take as for the future of Hispanic Latinos in America, or so, what would be one word for hope for the future that you'd have?
Courage. I think we're all very proud of where we come from, but also knowing that we're the minority, I think sometimes we'll choose to not share or to like not display that part of ourselves. And then of course when we find each other, we stick together. But also like I don't know, we can be more bold and we can be louder in terms of like what we're proud of and to advocate for others. So we're courageous like within, but we can be courageous outwardly. So, yeah.
I don't know if it applies. Education. I think that there is a lot that can be learned and a lot of work that can be done. And a lot of the young people that come here, they get their education here. I would love it if they could go back and keep working and helping, because it's not like DR. They're not like left to perish. Like there's still hope for them in the future. And so like I would love to live in DR. Are you kidding? To then just go back and to give and to help grow what's been so damaged in a lot of our countries.
I would say growth, like just constantly wanting to do better than what our parents did and what our generation is doing now, but just wanting to grow and be better people, and just within that, like looking at our home countries, seeing what we can do to help there, and just just overall, like we all deserve a better chance, so why not fight for it?
A word I think I have is solidarity
Mm.
or like unity.
Mhm.
Like Deborah said, like we're all together. We're all very tight knit group. But I think if we used that same like strength and power to speak up and to speak with each other and lift up those voices, I think that's super powerful. And to reach out to those people who don't feel like they have a voice, to reach out to those people who don't feel like they belong in Hispanic or Latino identities, but to have that family identity with everybody else is really important.
Uh,
I don't know why I'm crying.
I think the term I have is community. It's if you go somewhere new, even within the States, it's hard to find your little knit group. I know I'm a transfer student and it was hard for me it's 2 months and I'm still trying to figure it out. But everywhere you go, there will be that one person.
Right.
Like that one person who will get you into that next thing where and then you'll eventually have this huge village of people that can help you find your roots and find your ways, and get you connected and have the answers. The amount of stories I've heard from people who have come to the United States or gone to a new state or gone to a new city that didn't have anything, and they found the one person who said, all right, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna take you in. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And I think that's beautiful.
For sure. So I think the word for me is hope. Because I look back to when I was a child and I don't remember many Latinos who were in positions of leadership, who were speaking out. I just don't remember who you'd see. And now I see them and I see so that to me is there's hope that as there's the Latino population in the US has grown, but they've also look at us, look what we do, look at the contributions that are being made all over the place. Look at our campus, look at the contributions that you all make and how that you're still, or we all are still holding on to that, the importance of that Latino culture and what that has meant in our lives to get us where we are today. So, I think that to me is really hopeful.
Thanks for listening and hope you had a wonderful Hispanic Heritage Month. Hasta luego y Dios te bendiga.